Good evening. Today's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream on this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on the screen below the live stream page at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call, and when you do call, staff will ask for your name, item number that you wish to address, and telephone number. Then further instructions will be provided for you to call back and join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary Treasurer will unmute you when it is your time to speak. The applicant or agent will be given an opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A 5-minute maximum will be provided for a presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record, and a maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to any comments made by interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has concerns found in staff report, particularly the proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussions. Any person desiring a notice of decision for any application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary Treasurer. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Land Tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant, agent, and any other person who has filed a written request. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and the last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed timeframe, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's hearing is held via video recording and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. Do I have any we don't have any regrets this evening. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary interests? Okay, I see none. Thank you. At this time, I will take with requests for deferral or withdrawals. Madam Secretary Treasurer, if someone raises their hand for a withdrawal or a deferral, please invite them in.
Madam Chair, Mr. Graham Barrett, he's gonna speak in regards to the application 269 Westwood Drive.
Okay. That's CV 090 of 2022 at 269 Westwood Drive.
Good evening, committee members, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
Graham Barrett. I am now of SGL Planning and Design, 1540.
Mr. Barrett, can you put your camera on because we cannot see you, sir? Good. Go ahead. Now you're muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry. Is that better?
Yep.
All right, good stuff. So I am the agent for the owners of 269 Westwood Drive. Requesting a deferral because a variance was missed by the designer. Essentially garage projection. They were considering a different wall when it came to calculating garage projections. So we just be adding that additional variance and coming back as soon as humanly possible.
Very well. Then you'll see the secretary treasurer for the next opening. Committee members, I'm in your hands. All those in favor of deferral. Okay, your application has been deferred. Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you. There was no correspondence from neighbors on this matter.
Not
You
that
ready
we
to
have.
speak?
We don't have any, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Just double check if I haven't missed anything. All right, so our first item of our agenda this evening is CAV 084 of 2022 at 411 Englehart Street South. Again, it's CAV 084 of 2022 at 411 Englehart Street South. If you're interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095 and staff will be standing by to take your call, provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. I have Mr. Goral Tomaz as the agent for this application.
Correct, Madam Chair.
Good evening, Chair and committee members.
Good evening, Mr. Tomaz.
Is that better?
Yep, go ahead.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can't hear you guys.
Oh. Do you hear us now?
I'm not able to hear you guys.
Must be something from you.
I'm gonna leave the meeting and I'll come right back. That should work.
Yeah,
Okay.
no problem.
Is that better?
We can hear you.
I can't hear you guys.
It's very strange. Now we can't hear you at all.
Is that better?
We can hear you. Can you
I
hear
can't
us?
hear you guys. Does it make sense to go to the next hearing and then I'll jump on my laptop and I'll use that one?
Sure, we can take the next item and then we'll come back to you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item until Mr. Tomaz is able to fix his technical issues. That's item CAV 085 of 2022 at 1447 Constance Drive. Again, that's CAV 085 of 2022 at 1447 Constance Drive. If you're interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095. And staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. I will note on record that we do have one letter of objection from Ms. Carlton Tricia, who is the agent for this application.
Evening, my name is Cindy McPhee. I'm the agent.
Oh, good evening, Ms. McPhee. Go ahead.
Thank you for hearing us tonight. I represent the owners, Renee and Eric. They've actually lived down the street for 28 years, so they know the neighborhood very well. And they purchased this property to develop as their dream home plan and have done lots of research in terms of what their ideal home looks like on this property. And so we did develop it with all the zoning variances in mind, keeping it down to just this one, which is the floor area ratio. And we are asking for the variance for that amount at 43.8 versus the 41%. And we feel like this is minor in nature and fits within the development of the neighborhood. We don't have much presentation other than we have our site plan. I think it's the next sheet and what our floor plans look like in the elevations. We are aware of the objection. It seemed like more kind of like questions of clarifications of the item, but yes, for the tree and also to the variance, which is our only variance, the minor amount of the 43.8%. And so we are asking, we have a planning letter in support of our application as well, that we are aware of what the conditions are. The conditions are acceptable for our homeowners for the approval. And I'm open to asking or answering any questions that if any of the panel members have for our application.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. McPhee. Are there any questions of Ms. McPhee at this time? Would you care to comment on the issue of the tree? Is it being removed or is it being maintained?
No, the tree is being removed. Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. We looked at that when we designed the property, and there are many trees on the property that are also being preserved. And this is one tree that unfortunately is being removed because of the driveway location.
Okay. Very well. Are there any other questions of Ms. McPhee at this time? Okay, Madam Secretary Treasurer, have we had anyone sign in to speak to this application?
Madam Chair, if you can just repeat that anyone who wants to speak, they need to raise their hands, would be helpful.
Okay, application CV 085 of 2022 at 1447 Constance Drive. If you are in attendance and you'd like to speak to this matter, please raise your hand and you'll be invited to the panel. Okay, Madam Secretary Treasurer, if no one has raised their hand, we can take the matter into committee.
There is no one.
Okay, very well. Who would like to move a motion? Ms. Murray, go ahead.
Certainly, thank you. Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town's written staff report, which I note that the staff is in support of this variance. I've taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening in addressing the one question that had come in from the public with regards to the tree in the driveway. So I'm also noting that right now there is no one from the public that wishes to speak to the matter. I'm satisfied that the minor variance application meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application for a variance subject to the following conditions, which at this time for Constance Drive are a little bit lengthy. Just a note for the staff with regards to the requested conditions, I will read them as they've been written. Again, as I note, they're lengthy. That the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated April 6, 2022, and elevation drawings dated April 12th, 2022. and that the approval expire 2 years from the date of a decision if a building permit has not been issued. And the inclusion of a warning clause in all development agreements offered to purchase and agreements of purchase and sale or lease of each dwelling unit within 1,000 meters of the railway yard facility to address various issues relating to the safety and well-being of future occupants, but also to protect the integrity of railway operations and lands. The warning is as follows: Canadian National Railway Company or its assigns or successors in interest has or have rights of way within 1,000 meters of the land, the subject hereof. There may be alterations to or expansions of the railway facilities on such rights of way in the future, including the possibility that the railway or its successors as aforesaid operations, which expansion may affect the living environment of the residents in the vicinity, notwithstanding the inclusion of any noise and vibration attenuating measures in the design of the development and individual dwellings. CN will not be responsible for any complaints or claims arising from use of such facilities and or operations on, over, or under the aforesaid rights of way. The owner shall be required to grant CN an environmental easement for operational noise and vibration emissions registered against subject property in favor of CN. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, is there a discussion on this recommendation? I don't see where this is read from. Am I missing something? Did I miss a piece of the?
Through Madam Chair, Catherine Backfield, she wants to speak in regards to those condition issue from the CN.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Buckerfield.
Through you, Madam Chair, I wanted to speak to this. So town staff's recommended the traditional conditions, and then CN Rail provided comments related to protecting their interests. I reached out specifically to CN to ask them to clarify these conditions because it's the first time we've seen something like this. And when they learned that there wasn't a agreement that was planned to be put on title as part of this process, they said that that condition was no longer appropriate. Because there's not really a trigger point in which that would be crystallized because we don't have an agreement that they're going to be registering through this specific process. And in speaking with other staff at internally at the town hall, the other condition specifically related to requesting an easement for operational noise and vibration emissions is something that they can achieve through outside of this process. And I'll leave it to you as the committee to determine whether it'd be appropriate to apply this to the specific property in the circumstance, since this is not something that if they complied with the zoning bylaw would be specifically applied. So from our perspective, it may not be an appropriate condition or achievable condition through this process, and happy to discuss further, but I wanted to bring that up in this context.
Okay, very well. Is there any discussion on this? Ms. Murray?
Madam Chair, through you to town staff, would town staff prefer an abbreviated list of conditions?
I think from what am I understanding you correctly, Ms. Buckerfield, that we have our standard condition that are attached to the general accordance of the submitted plans and our 2-year standard condition, and then the rest of it can be dealt with on a separate forum. It doesn't need to be as part of our conditioning.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would agree with that. I think that when you apply conditions, they need to be appropriate and achievable and relevant to the specific development that's being proposed. And in this situation, they can request an environmental easement outside of this process. It's similar sometimes, you know, how CH has a permit that needs to be achieved, and we don't condition those on this side. This is part of the process. It's something that can be done outside of this, and I think that's a way to compare. It's good for them to know these comments. It's good for them to know that CN would like this environmental easement, and they should work with CN to achieve that. But at this point, I'm not sure that it would be appropriate to apply for every single variance in this area, but that's also up to your discretion. I would say definitely the first condition is not appropriate because they don't have an agreement that's currently going to be registered on title in order to solidify that and satisfy that condition. But the second one can be to your discretion.
Okay, so is there discussion on this recommendation? At this time, Ms. Murray, would you like to amend your recommendation and then we can all discuss?
Certainly, Madam Chair, I'll withdraw my original motion and amend to read that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated April 6, 2022, and the elevation drawings dated April 12th, 2022, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and that suffices. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in favor? Okay, your application has been approved subject to those conditions. Thank you, Ms. McPhee.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night. Okay, let's see if Mr. Gural has fixed his issue, because I believe you've got 2 applications before us tonight, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so this might have actually worked better for you, because the second one is actually up on queue right now. So
Correct.
let's start with the first one, CAV 084-2022. You can hear us okay now, correct?
Yeah, I can hear you and you can hear me, right?
Yes,
Yes.
we
I
can.
apologize for the computer glitch.
No worries. We all have those. This is application CAV of 084 of 2022 at 411 Englehart Street. Again, that is application CAV 084 of 2022 at 411 Englehart Street South. It's a new dwelling with a detached garage accessory building. And we do have 2 letters of support on file from Ms. Laura and Patrick Burke, and a Derek Woolman and a Jennifer Chapman. Go ahead, Mr. Gural.
Yes. Good evening, Chair and committee members. My name is Thomas Gral, and I'm the applicant for homeowners Erica and Paul Main at 411 Englehart Street. This is our second time here. We were here before. We didn't win that time. We had 7 variances. We went back to planning and worked with planning. We've reduced it to 4 variances, which we do have their support. I can go over them, but I sent in also a rendering. Does the rendering show by any? You guys have that on file?
Town staff, do we have the rendering for this application that was sent in?
To Madam Chair, it is going to be up on the screen in just a couple seconds.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so this is the dwelling we're proposing. This is the house that we'll be building. The garage in the back, the house detached and in the front. If we can now jump back to the site plan, we can stay for the rest of the presentation on the site.
Very well, thank you.
Okay, so one of the main drivers on this project was the garage. Originally, we had it closer to property lines. We've adhered to the 2-foot setback, so we have no variances for the garage. Because of that, we have to have the 2 meters between the garage and the house. So therefore, the covered porch was reduced in size, which is variance number 3, the lot coverage. That is less now than it was before. Number 1 was the window well, which we're still asking as we were asking before. Number 2 is the 0.7% more of the area of the home. And then the final point is number 4, which is the front yard setback. So we're asking for 8.19, and that's because of the stairs in the front of the home. I spoke with the zoning, and even though if it didn't have a cantina in the basement, because it's a covered roof, that's where the front yard is calculated. The dark line is where the front yard setback should be. So as you can see on the left corner, we comply with the side yard setback, or sorry, the front yard setback there, and then it just kind of pies off. And the reason the house is shifted is just because the property is angular, and that's why we're asking for 8.19 for front yard setback. So we have the planning support, and I hope we can have committee's support as well.
Okay, very well. Are there any questions of Mr. Gural at this time? Okay, I see none. If there is anyone interested in speaking to this application, please raise your hand,
Madam Chair.
and you'll be invited into the panel. Okay, if no one has raised their hand, Madam Secretary Treasurer, we will take the matter into committee.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
sorry.
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
a
I
little
didn't
late
see
on-
you there, Mr. Hardcastle. I apologize.
No, I just had a quick question of clarification with respect to the site plan and the walkway. I see that the walkway is relatively wide. Is that is in fact a walkway beside the driveway? And if so, is the intention that it would be flush mount with the driveway and function as a driveway area?
Mr. Gra, I believe that question is to you.
So they're pavers next to the asphalt. They're permeable, and we're gonna have grass in between the joints. It will be level with the asphalt driveway, but the intention is not to use it as a parking pad. However, if they're having a party, maybe someone will park there, but it's not for their personal use. They won't be using it as a parking pad. No, it's more decorative.
I'm sorry?
It's more of a decorative feature.
And if I could direct a second question towards staff, I've seen other variances where the walkway width is limited. This appears to be larger than other situations. Could I get some clarification from staff with respect to that? Whether there are provisions that deal with the width of this walkway?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm now kind of taking a high level look at it from that perspective, and I can see where your thought process is in terms of it could be determined as a potential driveway with variance or walkway. I would need zoning staff to have an interpretation on this, to be honest. I don't want to make on the fly interpretation of how this would be viewed, but I know that the walkway variances are related to the access point to the driveway. So if they were to miss a variance, then they would have to either come back or update the plans to comply. So if there is an issue at the point of building permit, they would then have to make that walkway shallow enough to comply, and they would have enough room in terms of if it was considered a driveway, they can have up to 6 meters wide, so they could still have a walkway, but maybe not as wide, and that could be determined at the site plan stage. So with that, I would recommend that the site plan be to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning to allow for space to mitigate that if necessary.
Okay. Any other?
Thank you. That's good.
Okay. If there are no further items of clarification, we can take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the presentation and the clarifications by both the applicant and by staff, I am satisfied that the requested variance conform to the 4 tests of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to 2 conditions, and I will take the advice of staff in terms of a slight modification to the first condition, and that condition shall read that the dwelling be built in general accordance. It'll be built in general accordance with the elevations dated March 6th, 2022, and site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, and that the approval will expire within 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. Thank you.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed. Did you raise your hand, Ms. Murray? No, are you opposed? Okay. So the application has been approved, 1 opposed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Grell, we're gonna go into application CV 086 of 2022 at 226 Riverview Street. Again, it's CV 086 of 2022 at 226 Riverview Street. If anyone would like to speak to this application, please call 905-815-6095, and staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions. Go ahead.
So I'm the applicant for Jeffrey and Christine Budd of the owners of this property. This particular property, we're only asking for one variance. Originally, when we were doing this design, we were under impression that this fell all under -0 Suffolk zone. So the area of the property is 593 square meters, and you're allowed 42%, which translates to 249 square meters. Talking to zoning, we realized that that's not the case. This is actually an RL8, and we're only allowed 200 square meters. We did talk with zoning originally. If we can just look at the side yard, side elevation, sorry. Those are existing, the proposed ones. This one, yeah. So the little bumper will be removed, and we're gonna just do a rear addition. Originally, we had the addition all the way to the back, but working with planning, they asked us to cut back the second floor to where it is right now. And therefore, this is what we agreed to, and it's gonna be 231 meters squared, 31 over. So we hope to have committee members support on this.
Okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Kamaz at this time? Or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. If no one's asked to speak to this application, we'll take the matter into committee. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to move that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the test of the Planning Act. Definitely some uniquely shaped lots, and as a result, the adjacent developments, I don't see any impact from the variances being proposed. I would note that there is no objection from the community, and I would make that approval subject to the addition being built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated April 19th, 2022, and the approval expire if the building permit does not issue within 2 years.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, your application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Good evening. Okay, application 087 of 2022 at 2929 Sherwood Heights Drive. Again, it's application 087 of 2022 at 2929 Sherwood Heights Drive.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm just checking if you could hear me. I would like to address both this application, which is CAB A087, as well as CAB A088, Madam Chair. And the reason is because there are two lots which merged when my client acquired them, so they are related applications. And with your permission, I'd like to address both of them.
We can certainly address both of them, but we'll have to make the motion on each of them separately.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
My name is Shamini Mahadevan, and I'm from Woodbull LLP, and I'm the agent for the owner of the two properties. My client acquired the two properties. They were two separate properties which were acquired by my client in 2016. And inadvertently on my client's part, they merged on the acquisition. My client now wishes to sell the southern property, that's 2929 Sherwood Heights Drive, and as a result has applied for a consent which was granted by a delegated authority and the related variances. This committee actually considered the variances for both properties, which is, it's just one variance for each property, which is a lot area variance. The committee considered and approved these variances in 2020. However, as a condition of the variances, the condition was that the lots had to be created and final approval had to be obtained prior to April 22nd of this year. Unfortunately, my client was not able to fulfill all the conditions. And the reason for that was because there was a lot of discussion with the region of Halton in relation to the appropriate related severance application. My client had initially applied for a part lot control exemption application, but Halton region required a consent application. So ultimately, the consent was obtained subject to conditions in December of 2021. And my client has fulfilled some, but not all of the conditions, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So in the context of the area of each lot, at the time that these lots were created, the area required was 0.2 hectares, and that was subsequently changed in through the 2014 bylaw. So what my client is actually wanting to do and needs in order to set the lots is to have a variance in relation to the minimum lot area for each lot. And the size of each lot will remain the same as they were prior to the merger. In the context of the official plan and zoning bylaw, it is my submission that the variance requested for each lot is in general keeping with the intent and purpose of the official plan and the zoning bylaw. There is no other variance that's required. In addition, both the official plan and the zoning bylaw recognize that there could be legal non-conforming lots, and it is my submission that in the context of the committee's previous support, the Halton region support, as well as town staff support, that the variances are appropriate and meet the 4 tests in the Planning Act. And they really are of a technical nature, given the approval of the variances 2 years ago, as well as they are reinstating the 2 lots that existed prior to my client's acquisition in 2016.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Mahadevan. I hope I pronounced that right.
Thank you, Madam Chair, yes.
Are there any questions or items of clarifications at this time? Okay, I see none. Whoever wants to move the motion, I'll kindly ask you to move a motion for each of the applications separately. Madam Chair, there has been no interested parties who would like to speak to this application, correct?
Correct.
Okay, very well. Go ahead, Mr. Flemington. I saw your hand go up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's submission to the committee, as well as noting that the town staff written report is in support of the motion, in support of the application. Also taking into account that there was no comments this evening in opposition of the application. With regards to what is proposed, I do find it is minor in nature and meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and putting it back basically achieves the objective that the applicant and the town would support. So I would like to move the motion for CAB A087 be approved as applied for, and I want to include the condition that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if the proposed lot has not been created and received final approval.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation for CAV 087 of 2022? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to CAB A088 2022, this is the other parcel of which my comments for the first motion also apply, finding that it is minor in nature, it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and that the town staff report is in support of the application, as well as no written or oral objections to it. So I'd like to move the motion that it be approved as applied for, with the following condition: that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if the proposed lot is not being created and received final approval.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you. Have a good night. Okay. Application CAV 089 of 2022 at 2471 Yarmouth Crescent. Again, it's CAV 087 of 2022 at 2471 Yarmouth Crescent.
Madam
If
Chair,
anyone is interested in speaking, yes?
I just got warning from the town staff, that if you can mute your microphone when the presentation is going on, like when
My microphone?
Yes,
There's
please.
an echo because of it?
yes, but
Okay.
only when the presentation going on, so they can clearly speak. Thank you.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Good evening.
Joel
Mr.
Tanner with the Office of Simple Design Studio, 15 Colburn Street here in Hamilton, Ontario. We're sitting in front of you today as a presentation for 2471 Yarmouth Crescent in Oakville. Next slide, please. Just overall conformity and density regulations pertaining to the property. Next slide, please. This is the existing side split residence, 1.5 story, which is going to be removed and replaced with a new 2-story proposed dwelling that we have in these attached plans. Next slide, please. Here before you is a proposal for a brand new single family dwelling, 2-car garage, concealed door on the right-hand side of the building envelope, a rear covered porch, front patio, in-ground pool, and a detached cabana. Next slide, please. First request of variance pertains to the lot coverage currently as proposed with the cabana. We're sitting at 38.72% as our total lot coverage. Allowable permitted usage coverage is 35% in this zone. Next slide, please. Request of variance number 2 is in relation to the overall gross floor area. As you can see by the framework, we're allowed 39% in the area. We are sitting at 42.78% with an increase of 3.78. Next slide, please. The owners of the property, whom are our clients, are going to be moving into this residence and living there full time with their family. Had a really good door-to-door session over the last couple of weeks and got letters of support from 10 neighbors. In addition to the neighbor support, there don't seem to be any objections from town staff. There are a couple comments pertaining to the height of a architectural pillar, as well as the encroachment of a window well into a side yard projection, which will be tackled in the building permit applications process and grading plan process. So we're not concerned with town staff's comment on those items. Next slide, please. On the top image is the front elevation, bottom image is the rear elevation. There are no current proposed renders of the cabana. It is yet to be designed, but we do feel that based on what is starting to transpire on that streetscape, there is going to be some overall redevelopment of the zone over the next few years. We're hoping to lead the charge here from a contemporary modern design standpoint on Yarmouth Crescent. Definitely open the doors to any comments or feedback that the committee has. Next slide, please. And I know that there was one individual that was going to be joining just to listen in on the hearing this evening. There was also one letter of objection. We don't have the address or telephone or email, so we're not able to pinpoint exactly where that residence resides. They might be here this evening to chat. It is Sandra and Rob Scott, and it is in relation to the cabana location in the rear yard and the requirement of the removal of the rear tree. I just want to let the committee know that we've already retained Michael with GLN Farm and Forest. They are a local certified arborist company. does a lot of our planning applications and site grading plan applications. We do have a plan to remove that tree, but we are looking to replace it with substantial vegetation along the rear tree line. So as opposed to relying on one dominant tree, we're looking to replace it with several more dominant species on the rear property line to provide privacy between the Donovan Bailey Trail network and the pool that is going to be added into the rear yard of 2471 Yarmouth. That is all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tanner. And just for the public to be aware, you are subject to a development engineering site plan process review. So stormwater and trees and all of that will be tackled at that point as well. Are there any questions or items of clarification from Mr. Tanner at this time? Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, since we have concerns from a neighbor about the tree, I was wondering if Mr. Tanner, or if not, Ms. Buckerfield, could speak to the separate Town of Oakville tree bylaw process and compensation that's required if the tree is permitted to be removed.
Certainly, I don't mind commenting on that. We will most definitely be going through a full site plan approvals process with the City of Oakville Town staff. We will be obtaining certified grading engineering documentation as well as full arborist documentation for the process. With all of our projects, if there are tree removals, we focus very heavily on replanting strategies. In certain circumstances, not necessarily in this one, but in certain circumstances, there is a alternative methodology for a payment of cash in lieu if the trees do not fit on the property. We don't see that as being a concern here based on collaborations with the arborist to date. But again, our clients are open to that discussion if we do reach that part of the process with the site plan grading approvals process.
Very well. Ms. Buckerfield, do you have anything further to add?
I think Mr. Tanner captured that. It's through the development engineering site plan DESP process. We have a tree inspector that reviews all the applications and comments on any trees that are to be removed, and will review all arborist reports and information through that process.
Okay, very well, thank you. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has someone called in and requested to speak to this matter?
Yeah, to Madam Chair, the participant, Mr. Todd Coulter, he is on. He wants to speak in regards to the application.
Okay, very well. Mr. Coulter, if you unmute yourself, you can address the committee at this time. We can't hear you still. No. You're not muted anymore. Maybe perhaps there's something wrong with your volume. Can you hear us? Okay.
While Mr. Coulter is working on his voice issues. Oh.
You can call in. There's the phone number 905-815-6095, and then staff will direct you. You can, as a caller versus on video conferencing. Can you hear me? Just nod yes if you can hear me. Okay, so there's the number again, 905-815-6095. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Tanner.
Yeah, we do have an initial tree replanting plan that's been put together by GLN Farm and Forest. So there's going to be a total of 18 trees replanted on the property based on the current proposed removals of the single family dwelling and the cabana in conjunction with one another.
Madam Secretary Treasurer, are you getting a call?
So, Madam Chair, he's gonna get through the some other line, and the Zoom needs to call him back and just connect to the meeting. So, yeah, he's in.
Okay, it'll take a couple more minutes. Okay.
Hi there.
Okay, very well. Go ahead.
Sorry for the confusion there. So we had some concerns as well. I know there was a signed sheet with some of the neighbors. We live adjacent to the property, and we have concerns over some of the variances. One being the height exceeding the 9-meter level, which didn't seem to be addressed during the meeting here. Hello?
Mr. Coulter, the height is not a variance for this application. There's only 2 variances that are being sought here. It's the residential floor area and the lot coverage.
Yeah, Todd, I think you're there was a comment from town planning staff related to the building height and that potential additional variances would be required by our office. But I just wanted to comment that it's related to an architectural column element, and that element will be shortened in height during the construction planning process. And so we'll be fully in compliance with the overall building height at the time of building permit applications. So that'll be that will not be a required variance, and which is why it's not listed this evening.
Okay. I know there's at least 2 other customers that are on the Zoom call right now. So the other variance is the 1.2 meters that will be from my property line, as well as the tree issue. So we live adjacent to the property. There is a beautiful maple tree that's probably 40 to 50 years old in the backyard, visible by Donovan Bailey Trail. And I think it would be an absolute shame. It provides lots of privacy for us. It builds into the neighborhood community ethics. And I think it would be a shame if the city, there's policies there about removing trees. And my understanding is they're going to remove 2 mature pine trees from the front yard and one of the biggest trees you can see on Donovan Bailey Trail in the backyard of their house. I also have concerns, and it's probably not part of the variances, but we bought this as our dream home as much as they are building their dream home. The setback of this house does not, I mean, there's within the posted documentation from the city, that it is within the development style or design of the neighborhood. And it is 100% not close to the style or design of any of the houses here. Most of the houses here are 1-story and of a more older design. Even some of the new developments that were built directly on the opposite side of our house. So again, we have concerns, and it may not be with variances, but we wanted to voice our concern about the setback of the house. There will literally be no privacy in the house we just purchased and have been working on. And again, with the removal of all the mature trees, which is why everybody moves to this neighborhood. We feel it would be a shame if the city allowed that to happen.
Okay, Mr. Coulter, thank you for your comments. Mr. Tanner, would you like to respond to some of those?
Yeah, most definitely, committee. Thanks so much, Mr. Coulter, for the feedback. Pertaining to the side yard setbacks, we are going to be in 100% conformity of the side yard setbacks set out within the Oakville bylaw. There is a slight projection of a window well. That detail will be taken care of during the construction documentation stage. So we're not seeking relief from the bylaw this evening for a side yard setback. Again, just kind of reiterating the plan for tree removals. We have a full arborist report put together from GLN so that our client was fully aware of the impact from a cost and from a planning perspective. And with those removals based on the Oakville bylaws, we are going to be mandated to replant 18 trees on the property, which are the client has to abide by, and that would be a part of the approvals process within the city of Oakville. And just to reiterate that we are going to be in compliance of building height, and we are allowed to build 2-story dwellings within this jurisdiction. So again, we're simply seeking relief from the bylaw pertaining to a small increase in the overall gross floor area and a small increase of the lot coverage. Again, keeping in mind the lot coverage calculation would include the proposed detached cabana is already included in that lot coverage calculation.
Very well.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. And just to reiterate, Mr. Coulter, the tree removal process is not under the purview of the Committee of Adjustment. We are only here to determine whether the 2 variances that are before us, which are the residential floor area and the lot coverage, meet the 4 tests and are acceptable within the scope of this development. And you will have an opportunity to look at the other process and be involved in it however much you'd like, since you are directly adjacent to the property. And as well, if you missed it, I'm not sure if you were listening from the beginning, this application is subject to a development engineering site plan. So a lot of the things that you are worried about also get dealt with through the scope of that process. At this time, if there are no other neighbors.
Sorry, can I just ask, how do we gain access to those other discussions within other councils or whatever?
You'll just call into the town and they'll give you all the information that you desire. And Mr. Tanner, as a neighboring development, I'm sure you can reach out to Mr. Coulter as you did with the other neighbors and kind of quell their fears about the development as well.
Yeah, Mr. Coulter, we'd be happy to provide the arborist documentation or meet on site and just kind of walk through how that process evolves with the city of Oakville and show you what documentation we've put together. Again, keeping in mind it has yet to be approved by the city of Oakville and it does need to go through their planning approvals process.
So I hope that answers your questions. I think we'll take the matter into committee now if no one else has called in to address this. Ms. Murray, do you have your hand up? Yes, go ahead. And Ms. Buckerfield, do you have your hand up? Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
So through you, Madam Chair, my question is about the site plans that we have before us dated April 21st, 2022. So at this point in time, do we have a feature wall that exceeds 9 meters or not in the plans we have?
Okay, I think I'll let Ms. Buckerfield comment on that, but I believe that we're leaving the general accordance of the plans to the director of planning, because as per the comments made from staff, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Buckerfield, that you believe that all of these amendments can be dealt with under that condition by making those amendments to the plans, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, the height variance, like the height that was identified was for that architectural feature, and we're of the opinion that it could come down and be represented in the at the time of building permit, and that's why we recommended to have the plans to satisfaction of the director of planning. I had one other comment after this, but I just want to make sure, did I satisfy that? Did I answer that question correctly?
Ms. Murray.
Yes, Madam Chair, here's where I'm struggling a little bit. This will be the second application this evening where it's to the satisfaction of the director of planning, which I appreciate in certain circumstances. It's more expedient, and I understand, project delays can be expensive, but we're not getting accurate drawings. And we're being asked to review things on the drawings that we have, and then at the last minute, we're being and the director of planning will make it okay. And so I'm struggling with that a little bit, because I believe the objective at hand with the committee is we receive materials and submissions from the public, and we do our site visits, and we're asked, but we're not drawing a conclusion because we don't have the site plans, and we're being asked to defer to the director of planning. So I won't be happy with that wording, and I won't be voting for it.
Okay, I understand. I see where you're coming from. From my perspective, when things are minor changes to the drawings that we have, they're not substantial. As you said, it's to expedite things and not delay plans or development any further at the cost. But I see your point, and I'll have Ms. Buckerfield further comment and perhaps take it up the chain with that. Go ahead, Ms. Buckerfield.
To Ms. Murray's comment, I think that it's completely at the direct discretion of the committee. It was if you agreed with our recommendation, this was a way to get there to allow for these updates, such as that pillar. And I will leave it to your discretion whether you agree with making it with those conditions. But I did want to make a point based on something that was made earlier, back to the resident. I wanted to make it very clear that the development engineering site plan process isn't actually a public process. It's a process that the applicant goes through with the town, where they submit their engineering drawings and they're reviewed, and they have an agreement in terms of the stormwater management and the treatment of the trees on the property. So the opportunity for him to express concern with the tree in the rear yard is at this point in time, and you can keep that in consideration when you're considering the lot coverage variance, because the variance for lot coverage does relate to that cabana. So if you do have a concern with the location of the cabana, this is the time to express that and maybe look for opportunities, whether it's appropriate to move or not. But I just wanted to make that very clear, that this is the public process in which he should be engaged. But as well, trees are reviewed through the development engineering site plan process. Hopefully that clarifies. I'm happy to clarify that further, but I wanted to make that clear so there wasn't any misunderstanding.
Okay, thank you for that.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Murray, I completely understand and appreciate your feedback regarding comments of changes to plans. I'm more than happy to share my screen. They're very, very minute details. I would never come to the committee and try to change large magnitude items. It's a formatted exercise within our AutoCAD software, and it will not change the overall depiction of the architecture in this specific circumstance. And there's also, a question as to whether it's considered an architectural feature, which is allowed to be taller. But again, we're going to be in conformity of that 9 meter height regulation.
Okay. Are there any other comments, or go ahead, Ms. Buckerfield?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I thought I would help clarify that that architectural feature, sometimes they're considered to be allowed to project, but in this situation, it's a load bearing well, I believe that's the situation. So it's considered, it has to be comply with the overall height. So that's why it was flagged. And I think that's why it was initially missed. So that's from a zoning interpretation. And so at that point, the height of that element would need to come down to comply. So just for her added clarification.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Buckerfield, that again, that's not a problem at all.
Can you clarify? I think Mr. Talowski already asked that question, but can you clarify where the neighbor's rights in terms of the tree issue is? Because I want to put that to bed here while Mr. Coulter is here so that he doesn't come back and say that he wasn't able to get the information that he needed or achieve the outcome that they need with respect to those trees. I only know the information where it is a joint property tree. So, and the decision becomes that they both have to agree to the removal, but anything past that, you'll have to comment on.
Thank you. So in this situation, the tribe, as Mr. Tlowski mentioned, the private tree bylaw applies, and it's evaluated through the development engineering site plan process where the health of the tree is evaluated. As Mr. Bruce, or sorry, I'm reading his name, Mr. Tanner, alluded to, is that they provide a representation to the town in terms of their plan for tree replacement and what's going to be happening on the property, and that's something that the town staff would comment on. So in terms of the neighbor, if he has concerns with the tree, this is the point in time that he would bring it up when we're determining the location of the cabana through this process. And he can let his neighbor know that he has a concern with it, but at this point, it would be go through the process of the private tree bylaw to determine whether it's appropriate to remove that tree.
Okay, so then he can have access to that process, the tree process, the private bylaw process, is what I'm saying.
I don't believe that he would be necessarily involved in that. I think the process is the town staff would work with the owner of the property to determine that. Okay. Maybe the applicant, I'm sure he's gone through this process quite a few times from the applicant side. Maybe he can elaborate on it a little bit further.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Brookfield. Again, we would be more than happy to come out to site and to meet with the homeowners next door and walk them through what the next steps would look like should there be an approval this evening. Again, more than happy to show them the arborist report and the replanting plan related to the 18 species that are going to be replacing the proposed removals. Again, we work with what we take as being one of the best arborists in Oakville and the GTA to work with, very well known in the city. And so for us, we take vegetation and trees very seriously in our applications. So again, happy to meet the neighbors at some point along with our client who is the owner of the property.
Okay. And just to clarify, the tree that Mr. Coulter was speaking about, is that up for removal or no?
It is currently up for removal in the rear yard due to the proposed cabana as well as the proposed pool. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other discussions or items of clarifications or questions before we take the matter into committee? Mr. Coulter, go ahead. If you have a question, I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. But for me, the whole variance to the property footprint is in relation to the cabana, which is in fact is the reason why the tree is being cut down. So I don't think we're making the relation between the variance that's being requested and the end effect of approving that variance.
Yes, I see your point. And I guess that will be up to the committee to decide, and that's why we are hearing all the concerned parties before we do take the matter into committee and make a decision on that.
And through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Coulter. Mr. Coulter, the tree would be affected whether the cabana stays or doesn't stay, because it's substantially affected by the proposed pool in the rear yard as well. So it's driven off of hardscaping in addition to pool proposal, in addition to cabana. So it's a bit of a trio efficacy on that tree.
All right, so at this time, we've heard all the parties. We'll take the matter into committee. Ms. Marie, I still see your hand up, so I am sorry, I get confused because of that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question through you to our agent is because of the concern in lot coverage, which affects a very mature tree and then the canopy on the trail, is there any consideration to scaling back or changing the plans with regards to the rear yard amenities, being the pool and the cabana, to save the tree?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Murray. We have had some discussions with our client, who is the property owner. They did attempt to reach out to the Scotts at one point, were unsuccessful. In terms of the removal of the tree, they would like to stand by a removal of that tree. You know, if there's substantial concern from the committee. Again, we're here with committee talking about a proposal where we have town staff approval or endorsement. We also have endorsement from 10 neighbors and signatures. And so we feel that the proposal is in keeping with the overall conformity and what's going to be happening on the street in the next 5 or 10 years. So I think the client is quite keen to keep the removal on that tree on the table.
Okay, any other questions, items of clarification before we take the matter into committee? Okay, I see none. Who would like to start the ball rolling? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This may be a lengthy motion. Madam Chair, I share Ms. Murray's concern that we're starting to see more and more unperfected applications. In this case, I believe the changes, the interpretation of what's a wall, what's an element, and the fact that
Mr. Talowski, we lost you.
the applicant's willing to,
I'm sorry, we lost
am I
you.
back now?
Yeah, now you're back.
One of those nights.
So you were saying what we heard up until is the application, unperfected applications.
And I hope that this doesn't become a trend, but in this case, they're very minor differences. The applicants expressed his willingness to revise the drawing to ensure that there aren't 2 additional variances. And I don't believe that revision would be a significant impact to what's being proposed. And in this case, again, in particular, with the issue of the tree, I'm actually comfortable with the condition if this gets approved to the satisfaction of the director, because if Mr. Tanner does not get permission to take the tree down, then he will have to amend his plan to the director's satisfaction. On the other hand, Mr. Tanner, I think you clearly heard from Ms. Murray that strike 1. Perhaps calling the town of Oakville a city is strike 2, but I won't hold that against you. I do want to speak to the residents' concerns, noting that there are 10 letters of support. With respect to the main concerns that I heard from the neighbor dealing with setback, compatibility, and the tree. Again, it's been noted, but I'll re-note it that the applicant is not looking for a side yard setback. And the issue of compatibility reminds me of an old famous Ontario Municipal Board hearing that determined that compatibility does not mean the same as. And Madam Chair, yes, this house is different for the street in its current state, but I believe it is of a compatible scale to what's on the street. It does not appear to represent an overbuild. And again, with the tree, we've covered it, but just to renote, there is a separate process that the applicant has the right to go through. They also have the right to go through this process. If he does not get permission to take down the tree, then he won't be building the cabana and possibly won't be building the pool. And it's been noted as well that you cannot just take down a tree in Oakville. You have to provide compensation either through replanting on-site, off-site, or cash. So with all that said, Madam Chair, on a whole, I believe that this application can move forward tonight. I don't believe the changes that we're expecting are going to be of a significant nature. Again, highly encourage Mr. Tanner to speak further with his neighbors and explain exactly what they're trying to achieve with the tree compensation if they're allowed to take it down. But with all that said, Madam Chair, I do believe that this application is minor and meets the test of the Planning Act. I'm going to move its approval, subject to the dwelling being built in general accordance with the submitted site or with site plan and elevation drawings to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, and that the approval expire in 2 years if a building permit doesn't issue.
Okay. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved. One opposed.
Thanks so much, committee. Have a great evening.
Good evening. Sorry, Jasmina, I didn't hear you.
I needed the letter of support because I don't have any records. Like this is okay. I will email to Mr. Tanner tomorrow to send me the letter of support because we didn't receive on the time he just presented those.
Oh, okay.
Okay, no problem. I'm gonna email. To
Has he already disconnected?
Yeah, he's already disconnected. No problem. I can email to him tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, we have application CAV 091 of 2022 at 220 Chartwell Road. Again, it's CAV 091 of 2022 at 220 Chartwell Road. If anyone is interested in speaking to the application, please call 815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conferencing. Who is the agent for this evening?
Madam Chair, I am Peter Giordano.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Giordano. Now we see you. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Peter Giordano, David Small Designs, 1405 Cornwall Road in Oakville, the authorized agent.
Go ahead, your presentation is up.
Okay, perfect. Can I ask the moderator to start with page 2, please, the next page. We're here today requesting your consideration on 6 variance items. The context map displayed on your screen shows the unique placement of our property between adjacent residential neighbors at 218 and the Chartwell Baptist Church and parking lot to the direct west of us. Slide number 3, please. The context aerial map shows the positioning a little bit better. Slide number 4, please. The next 4 slides are 3D elevations of what we're proposing. The important aspect to take into consideration on the front elevation is the stepping of the house. So we've got an articulated front facade. We're asking for a front yard variance, which I will be discussing in a moment, but it is taken and measured to the far right side. You'll see that the articulation actually steps the facade back, and the two garages are secondary and positioned furthest away from the front property line. Next page, please. Now this is the right side of the house. This faces the parking lot for the Baptist church. It's a well vegetated property. Lots of trees on this side. Not very many windows, but it's effectively facing the parking lot of the church. Next page, please. Rear elevation, again, has a covered porch. Part of the porch is covered, part of it isn't. And then there's what we believe to be a well-articulated rear elevation as well, with a lot of facades. Now, this faces directly towards the Baptist church, which is the rear neighbor of our property in this case. Again, a lot of vegetation in the rear, so there's privacy screening, which works out well for us. Next page, please. On the left side, this is the part that faces the neighbor at 218. We've purposely made the impact of this elevation a lot smaller, so the amount of facade on the left side that faces the neighbor is considerably smaller. Can I ask you to go to page 7, please? Again, just a few more 3D elevations showing the view from above, looking down onto it, just to show the amount of articulation we have done on the facade. Next page, please. So this is a list of our variance items. Our variance item number 1 is an increase to the width of the walkway connecting to the driveway. Required is 1.8 meters. We're asking for 2.39. It's a difference of just under 2 feet. We don't believe this additional width to be visually or physically impactful, although we acknowledge that the planning staff comments do not support this variance out of our 6 variances. We'll leave it in your hands to determine if this request meets the 4 tests. We believe it does. Item number 2, variance item number 2, requests an increase in the attached garage area, 56 square meters to 778. As you can see, the garage is a stacked tandem garage in plan, but it's expressed as on the front elevation as just the 2 garage doors to make the massing secondary and lessen its size impact. Variance item number 3 is a side yard variance. The side yard variance reduced from 4.2 to 2.24. Again, it's the variance that faces the parking for the Baptist church to the right of our property. Variance item number 4 is for RFA. 29% is required, allowed. 30.78 square meters is what we're proposing. Again, we believe that the step massing plays an important role in downplaying the effect of the residential floor area. Item number 5, coverage, 25%. We're asking for an increase of just 0.45%, 25.45. 1-story flat roof area in the back, the covered porch and open porch contribute to 2.06% of the total coverage. Planning staff are in support of both the RFA and the coverage variances. And then last, variance item number 6. We're asking for a reduced front yard setback from 25.91, which is existing, to 18.87. You'll notice that the zoning states 18.49. That is not correct. So we're asking for a number that's actually better, 18.87. If we could make that correction, that would be fine. As mentioned already several times, the front facade is stepped. This elevation, sorry, this plan indicates with a few additional arrows that the garage is actually 25.2 setback, and then it steps 24. The closest corner is the 18.87, and then because it's not parallel to the front property line, it increases again to 18.54. Planning staff reports in all departments are in support of the application, except for the walkway. We'll leave it up to you to determine if this is an appropriate increase. In conclusion, we believe our variance items to be minor, appropriate, and pass the 4 tests of Section 45 of the Planning Act. We accept the general conditions requested by community planning, and at this time, if you have any questions, I'm available to answer those.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Giordano. Are there any questions or items of clarifications of Mr. Giordano at the time? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer? Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to this item, CAV 091 of 2022 at 220 Trotwell Road?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, very well. Who would like to move a motion on this application? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I will. I'll just take a moment here to just articulate that I think that Mr. Giordano has done an excellent job in terms of speaking to the context and the details of this building in terms of addressing some of the concerns that there may be present and speaking to. My apologies. I've just got distracted by some background noise here. My apologies. His presentation has spoken very well to some of the context and the details of concern to me, both in terms of the built form, massing of the building. I would also touch on the front walkway. Which at 2 foot increase over what the bylaw would require, and with the configuration of it, the functionality that was spoken to in the staff comments, I don't share those concerns, and so I'll be putting forward a motion that would support and approve all of the variances that are in front of the committee. I would note that that all variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. So I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to 2 conditions. Those conditions being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan. Sorry, I don't have the date. Within the condition.
We have the elevation. We just don't have the site plan date.
Correct. And bear with me for a quick second, and I'll pull the date off of the.
It's April 26th to 2022.
For both?
For the site plan.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Buckerfield. So that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan. Dated April and elevation drawings dated April 26, 2022, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. I would note that there were no members of the public present with respect to this matter, and there were no submissions made with respect to this matter. Thank you.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? Okay. All those opposed? Okay. The application has been approved. 1 opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
Good evening. Okay, application. Application CAV 092 of 2022 at 1052 6th line. Again, this is CAV 092 of 2022 at 1052 6th line. If you're interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095 and staff will be taking your call and providing you with further instructions to join the video conferencing. Who is the agent for this application? Is it Emmeline Decoré?
No, Madam Chair, it's Pazman Shania, Miss Pazman Shania.
Hello.
Or Mr. Sorry, I apologize. I don't have any records.
Hi, member of committee, Pejman Sainia from Rigid Frame Structural Engineers and Architects.
Mr. Sainia, can you turn your camera on, please?
I'm not sure. Oh, okay. Start video.
Very well.
Okay.
We can see you now.
All right.
Welcome. Go ahead. Your presentation is on.
Okay. So, so the presentation is about 1052 6th line. I am the agent for Mr. Fadi Behnam from Rigid Frame Structural Engineers and Architects, 250 Consumers Road. Please go to the first page. Yes, so we have just one minor variance at the rear side setbacks that we have. It is 4.2 meter. The allowable is 4.2 meter. But because of the existing condition right now, if we want to propose the second floor, we have to go to 3.06 meter, meaning it would be 1.14 meter. We are encroaching to the north side yard setback. They exist, and it is from the second floor. So basically, it is non-conforming, and because we are removing the roof and we are putting back the second floor as a new proposal for the project, we are aligning the second floor on top of the first floor. And next page, please. So on the right-hand side, which it is north, basically that line on the main floor, it is existing on the second floor. We want to align the proposal, or it would be a load-bearing wall, basically, for the exterior on the main floor, which would be 3.06 meter encroaching to the setback. And next slide, please. This drawing shows proposed main floor plan, which, as you see, we are keeping the existing existing layout or footprint, so it stays as legal non-conforming. And next slide, please. So for this second floor, we are proposing to again align with the main walls at the first floor. We use the same line, so it would be aligned with the first floor walls. Next slide, please. And this drawing just shows that we are not encroaching to any tree protection zone. We are not adversely affecting any soft landscaping area, and which was on the right-hand side of this drawings. Next slide, please. The area, it just shows the area that most of the dwelling at the area are either 1-story, 1.5, or 2-story dwellings. So we are not building something extravaganza or strange for the neighborhood. Next slide, please. This is the south elevation, which is we are trying to match the north elevation and south elevation, so the two similar to match. Next slide, please. And this would be the north elevation that I was explaining. The main floor was the same. We are removing the roof and building up the second floor on top. And the last slide, please. This is the west elevation. Again, we are trying to remove the roof and build up the second floor.
Okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Sanya at this time? Any items of clarification? I see none. I see that you have 5 letters of support from your neighbors, and we have those on record. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in with interest to speak to this application?
No phone calls, Madam Chair.
Okay. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Ms. Murray. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I note that the town is in support of, having also taken into account the comments by the applicant this evening. Thank you for the presentation this evening. I think it was well laid out, and thank you for working with the neighbors. I think that's very helpful. So, and noted, of course. I note that there is nobody present to speak for or against this particular application this evening.
Ms. Murray, you froze. We lost you.
The Planning Act, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application as applied for, with the following conditions: that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated April from the date of a decision if a building permit has not been issued. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Murray. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Okay, the application CAV 093 of 2022 at 2286, 2297, and 2298 Sovereign Street, and 124, 126, and 128 of East Street. Who is the agent for this application?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Can everybody hear me?
Now we can, yes. Mr. Pearson?
Okay, great. Okay, yep. My name is Patrick Pearson. I am a planner with Glenn Schnarr and Associates. We are the authorized agent for the owner of the subject property. For the record, my address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Mississauga. Our client is seeking approval of this minor variance A-093 to facilitate a 19-unit townhouse development. I'll just give a brief presentation to help inform the committee's decision, and I'll also be here to answer some questions afterwards. Next slide, please. So the subject property is generally located at the intersection of Sovereign Street and Main Street in the town of Oakville. The property has dual frontage along Sovereign Street and East Street and is currently occupied by 4 residential units and 1 semi-detached unit. Although I think they have received.
Hold on 1 second, Mr. Pearson. Just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, he just realized that. Go ahead.
Are we good?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I was saying the property is currently occupied by 4 dwelling units and 1 semi-detached unit, although I think a demo permit's been recently approved and I think constructions began. The surrounding area is a well-established neighborhood, stable residential characteristics, predominantly 1- and 2-story detached dwellings, and then there's some commercial and infill development as well in the surrounding area. Just a bit of background on this site, because there's quite some history, or quite a lot of history to it. The property has gone through a site-specific OPA and zoning bylaw in the past. This was approved in 2017, and then subsequently a site plan application was conditionally approved in 2018. We're currently going through the process of finalizing that site plan, and we made a resubmission this past month, and we're hoping we can address all the conditions and comments. Next slide, please. So I guess in order to facilitate the approval of the final site plan, following variances are being requested. Number 1, to permit townhouse dwellings not in accordance with section 15381.1G of the site-specific bylaw, and I'll explain that later on this presentation. Number 2, to permit the dwellings located on block 1 lands to project 1.5 meters into the front yard of a maximum of 73% of the dwelling's width, where the zoning bylaw permits 60% of the dwelling's width. Next slide, please. So I guess I'll just start off by saying that the plans haven't changed since the initial approval of or they haven't changed much, I guess I should say, from the initial approval of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. There's been some minor tweaks throughout the finalization of the site plan. For example, like I think the mailboxes have moved slightly, but generally like the built form and massing hasn't changed at all. So I guess I'll start off with variance 1, the increase in the required yard projection. You can see sort of on the top of the screen on the north of on the page there that there's a red box surrounding the fronts of the units within block 1. So that is where variance 1 is applied to, this portion of the site. The projection sort of that is provided is intended to ensure that the townhouse block isn't just a flat wall, and it sort of provides more of a variation and articulation from the street's edge. I would like to note that this variance number 1 that we're seeking request for, it has previously been approved, although the approval lapsed because the building permit wasn't ultimately pulled within I think it was 2 years. So we're just reapplying for the exact same variance, and hopefully we'll have permits shortly. And I guess we're just here to simply reapply for that variance. On that basis, I believe that the intent of the application is still being met for variance number 1. And then the second variance pertains to the building heights for all 3 blocks shown on the screen here. And next slide, please. And so on the left, you'll see that there's an illustration which was included in the site-specific zoning bylaw. It's a fairly detailed zoning bylaw. They tried to sort of lock in and restrict the development which was approved fairly strictly. So there's this sort of complicated bylaw. And then on the right, you have an actual elevation of what we're proposing. You can see that there's a max wall height of 8 meters, which is what we're conforming to. We're providing 7.7. However, if you can read it as noted, it says the dormer's max height is 11 meters and not only if the dormer's no more than 50% of the width of the roof. And that's sort of where the variance is coming into question here. And I sort of highlighted on the right where the variance is applying. It's only to the dormer. Next slide, please. So these are the current elevations of the townhouses. You can see the dormer on the left, the small square one. So that one actually complies to the 50% requirement, whereas the dormer on the right does not. It takes up more than 50% of the width of the unit. So I would just like to reiterate that these plans haven't changed since the initial adoption of the zoning bylaw. I'm not really sure what happened at that time. We weren't involved with the preparation of that drafting of that bylaw. We were sort of retained after the fact, but we're going through the site plan process now, and it was ultimately flagged, and we would like to maintain the sort of plans that have gone through these processes. So we're simply just trying to bring this plan into conformance with the draft zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. Both variances that we're requesting here tonight seem to be more technical and housekeeping issues. We're not seeking further relief from any bylaws. We're mainly just trying to bring the proposal into compliance with what was sort of reviewed and approved at the time of the zoning bylaw. So for those reasons, we respectfully request that the committee approve this application. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
I'm so used to keeping it on all the time. Now that I'm toggling between, I'm forgetting that I am. Thank you. Are there any items of clarifications or questions of Mr. Pearson at this time? Ms. Murray, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, to town staff, I'm referring to notes under variance 2. The dwelling projection. This relief in building facade along Sovereign Street assists in mitigating some of the context of the site on the edge of Bronte Village growth area. Can you provide a little more context?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to provide some more context. You cut out a little bit during your question, and I want to make sure I actually answer it completely. Would you be able to repeat that?
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair, to town staff, I'm trying to better understand the first 2 sentences under staff notes of variance 2 as it applies to the Bronte Village growth area. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think what in the situation, this development is considered a transition area towards more stable residential. So on the one side of the street, you see single detached homes, and then if you looked across the street on the other, you would have actually seen another 3-story townhome development, and then further down the commercial that Mr. Pearson was speaking to. So the intent was that the massing of this development was broken up a bit to allow for that transition to that adjacent development, and that same rationale for the design of the 3rd story was so that it wouldn't present as a full 3-story development, but have that feeling that that 3rd story was in the roof, and so that it would have a bit of a softer transition to the single detached homes on the other side of the street. Hopefully that answers your question.
I see Ms. Murray nodding, so I think she's satisfied. Okay. Any other questions or items of clarification? Yeah, I see none. If there has not been any interest from the public. Oh, Ms. Murray, go ahead. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, my screen froze, Madam Chair. So again, can town staff please explain? So this is the 4th application tonight. By tying the decision to the submitted plans to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, the intent of the provision will still be achieved. It's under variance 1.
Absolutely. So in this situation, this application is subject to site plan. And we want it that it's still in the process, as Mr. Pearson alluded to, and they've provided these updated plans. So in that situation, we've always tied the final application to those final plans to the satisfaction of the director of planning, so that if there was any small, minute issues that needed to be resolved, then they could be resolved and you still have substantial conformance with what's seen today. In this situation, the wording of the variance is a bit broad. So by making sure that it's tied to elevations that have been submitted, it's clear that the intent of the provision is still being met and that we're satisfied that they're achieving what they're saying they're going to achieve.
So I'm confused because it says through the site plan, it was determined the peaked elements do not meet the definition of a dormer and they're not permitted.
Correct. So what Mr. Pearson was speaking to before is that the plans that were before council when they did their rezoning for the property showed these peaked elements, and when through the writing of the bylaw, they weren't captured accurately in terms of the permission. And by now coming forward, they know those peaked elements don't comply with the zoning bylaw, but this variance is allowing for them to continue. And that's the intent.
If the bylaw changed and said, we don't want this anymore, these elements we don't want anymore, we now have a situation.
Ms. Mary, you cut up again, so we can't hear you.
Sorry,
you have to repeat it again.
Certainly.
If the bylaw, we heard up until if the bylaw changes.
So the bylaw has changed. So from when these were originally presented, the bylaw has changed and is deemed that these elements are not desirable, correct?
No, the bylaw hasn't changed. It's the interpretation of the bylaw. It was determined that the definition of dormer didn't capture these peaked elements. So these peaked elements that were shown on the plans from the very beginning don't comply with the wording of the zoning bylaw. So now through a variance, we're, like he said, it was a bit of a housekeeping item to rectify it. But I think Mr. Pearson, the agent, may want to speak to this more clearly. He's been involved from the start, and I can see his mute has been brought off. Would you be okay if we directed it to him?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Through the chair. Yeah, and this is a bit of an odd scenario. And like I said, I didn't draft the initial bylaw. That happened before my time, but this was a site-specific zoning bylaw. So this site-specific zoning bylaws went through the public process, those same elevations that we have today. Nothing's changed. The building still looks the same as the time it was initially approved. Although it appears that either the planner who wrote the bylaw at the time is not the planner now, and there's a different interpretation. That's the only way, or it was just overlooked, because the bylaw that was written very specifically, and I think I showed that schedule that was included in the bylaw. Like they wrote the bylaw in such a way that it was only going to be this development approved, and this development has not changed. It just seems to be that it was overlooked or maybe interpreted differently at the time it was designed, but the elevations and everything that we're showing now is exactly what was shown at the time of the adoption of the bylaw. So hopefully that clarifies.
Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
Sorry to be devil's advocate, though, conversely.
You cut up again.
Sorry, conversely, though, the bylaw did change, and maybe the intent was to change. And this no longer conforms, or this is not what the city wants. You're asking us to presume what the bylaw, how the bylaw was written and the intent of the bylaw, which seems fairly strict. Anyways, I'm trying to, and specific to this site. So
yeah, well, maybe you could pull the, go back to the elevations. I would like to just show it because the elevations were actually included in the draft bylaw. And they are the exact same elevations that are shown here on the existing plans. Those were the same plans that were shown in the actual draft bylaw in the staff report. So nothing has changed. Like that peaked dormer, that was also shown in the draft bylaw. So it would appear that the draft bylaw that was approved didn't adequately encompass this peak dormer, when it would be my assumption that it should have, because it was approved based on reviewing these exact plans.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Flemington. Thank you for calling out, because while we're on the other screen, I can't see anyone.
Yeah, no problem. And with regards to the last image that was up, for clarification, so what was on the drawing that was previously up was what was submitted to the town for a site-specific bylaw to be drafted. That bylaw was drafted based on the diagram that was illustrated on the last slide, and it was written with that development as illustrated in that diagram. What I understand from town staff is that now the interpretation of the bylaw was missing the one peak that was illustrated on the diagram. So therefore, this application is trying to ask for a variance that addresses how that interpretation was missed from the bylaw being written for the site specific. So in other words, it was not another zoning bylaw that was written to exclude it. It was just the interpretation of what was submitted. So my understanding is from the applicant's agent is that. I don't know if that helps. Or could the town staff please let me know if I've interpreted that incorrectly.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would say that Mr. Flemington has summarized what's occurred accurately, that the plans that are before us now in terms of the elevations are consistent with the elevations that were before town council when it was approved the initial zoning bylaw. The wording has been deemed to not capture what was intended to be built accurately. So now the variance is being sought to allow for what was intended to be built.
Thank you.
Satisfied, Ms. Murray? Okay. Any other questions or items of clarification? Okay, I see none, and I don't believe anyone has called in for this application, so we're ready for a motion. Who would like to take a gander at that? Go ahead, Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to note that I have reviewed the applicant's written application and noting that this was before the committee once before. Also noting the technical nature as to why variance 1 is before us. I don't see any negative impacts to any of the neighboring residents or buildings that are in the neighborhood. As well, I want to note that there was no oral presentations this evening objecting the application, nor any written objections of the application. So I want to say that it does meet the intent of the bylaws and the Planning Act, the 4 tests, and I will move a motion in support of the application.
Oh, we lost you, Mr. Flemington, up until support of the application. I'm wondering if it's from his end or town end. We've been having this all night. Mr. Flemington.
It's Madam Chair.
Yes.
They said it's not from us, but I don't know what's happened.
Okay, we lost him. We're just gonna have to give him a minute to come back and finish his motion. Jasmine, can you text Mr. Flemington and see if he's able to come back, or should we move forward? There might be a technical issue on his end and it's not facilitating his login again.
I just emailed to Mr. Flemington, but he's not responding yet.
Okay, perhaps someone else can move the motion and we'll move forward. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll start over. I see this as a very straightforward application. The applicant applied for his zoning bylaw. Staff wrote a zoning bylaw. That bylaw, the exact plans were presented to council. Council approved it. Over the course of time, people change, interpretations change. I've been there myself. And I'm satisfied that not only does this application meet the intent of the zoning bylaw, it is absolutely what the zoning bylaw intended. And I find there to be no impacts from this variance. I'd note there is no objection from the community. And I would make that move to approve this application subject to proposed development being constructed in general accordance with final approved site plan and elevation drawings to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, that being because it has to go through site plan, and that the approval expires within 2 years if the permit hasn't issued.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed, and Mr. Flemington was, although here, was absent for the voting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night. Okay, the last item on our agenda this evening is application CAV 072 of 2021, deferred from October 5th of 2021 at 129 Claxton Drive. Again, it's CAV 072 of 2021, deferred from October 5th, 2021 at 129 Claxton Drive. I'll note that we do have 2 letters of opposition and 2 letters of support on record. I believe Mr. Gus Ricci is the agent. Is he with us? Madam Secretary Treasurer.
Mr. Gus Ricci is.
I'm here.
Okay, very well.
I'm trying to get my camera to work. There we go.
Great. Very well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Gus Ricci, the architect and agent for the application at 129 Claxton. Just as a brief history, this project or this application has been around for a while. We first came to committee on May 18th, 2021 with our first application requesting variances for increased height from 9 meters to 9.5, increase RFA from 29% to 34.29%, and also increase garage area size from 45 square meters to 66.3. We had received planning staff comments that didn't support the application at that time. So when we came to committee back in May 18th, we asked for a deferral. That deferral took us to the second committee of adjustment hearing, which was October 5th, 2021, at which time we made some modifications to the design where we reduced the height from 9.5 to 9.36. We reduced the residential floor area from 34.29 to 32.5%, and garage area stayed the same. Based on that second application and based on planning staff comments that again had concerns about height and size residential floor area, we came back to the committee one more time and asked for another deferral, at which time we went away and we spent some time with the client, and we decided to modify the design, the exterior design of the home to eliminate the steep sort of chateau roof that you typically were seeing. And we modified the design so it's more of a modern roof, low profile roof. And by doing so, we were able to eliminate the height variance. So the variances before you tonight do not include the height variance. And what we're asking for is an increase in residential floor area from 29% to 32.06, and garage area from 45 square meters to 65.61. You'll notice on the site plan drawing that we're proposing, we meet all the setback requirements. We're actually not as wide as what's permitted. We're at 4.8 on the north side and I believe 5.8 on the south side. So we have ample space around the property. We have not maximized the width, trying to maintain the mass, reduce the mass and the context of the home on the street. As I mentioned, we reduced the massing by reducing the overall roof line. So again, we don't need a variance on the height. And by changing the architectural style, we were able to, again, reduce the mass of the home. Based on the second application and this current application, we tried canvassing neighbors. We did receive letters of support from 1364 Cambridge and 112 Tree Lawn, which I believe you have on file. We'd also like to note that on Claxton in 2020, there's two other variance applications that were approved. One at 158 Claxton Drive for a new home, where a residential floor area of 31.5% was approved. And also at 153 Claxton Drive, just north of our property, was approved at 32.5% on basically the same size lots. So we think the development is appropriate development for the area. It suits the context and development that's occurring in the area, and we meet the four tests of the Planning Act. And finally, the planning staff support the application, and we've looked at the conditions as stated in the planning report and fully accept the comments that were provided. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Again, sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Are there any items of clarification or questions of Mr. Ricci at this time? Okay, I see none. Welcome back, Mr. Flemington. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in? I do know we do have 2 letters of opposition. Has anyone interested called in to speak to this application?
Through Madam Chair, I do still see somebody in attendance, but the person needs to raise a hand if she wants to speak.
Okay, if there's anyone in attendance who would like to speak to this matter at 129 Claxton Drive, CV 072 of 2021, please raise your hand and you'll be invited in to the panel to address the committee. Has anyone raised their hand?
No, Madam Chair.
Very well, then we can take the matter into committee if there are no questions or items of clarification of Mr. Ricci at this time. Mr. Ricci, have you addressed the concerns from the opposition, just so that we have your comments on record?
Well, what I can state is the neighbor immediately to the north, last name is Lockwood. I believe that's one of the addendums you have.
Yeah.
We met with the client and I met with them during the second design application that we came to the committee on October the 5th. And Mr. Lockwood voiced some of his concerns at that meeting. If you read the letter, I believe a lot of the comments they have was with respect to the lack of maintenance on the property, and when is this going to get cleaned up, and when's, you know, the way the property has been vacant and has not been maintained as nicely as they had wished. I understand their concerns about the size of the home and the scope, but we feel based on the current development on the street, the development being proposed is quite consistent with what's currently going on the street itself. There's also a fairly large cedar hedge between the 2 properties, so which will be maintained. So I think that will help reduce the visual impact between the 2 properties. And that actually leads to a similar point with respect to the second objection letter you have from 112 Tree Line, which is in behind the property. Again, if you visited the property, you'll note there's a large cedar hedge across the back of the property that is on the property of 112 Tree Lawn. That cedar hedge has to be at least 20 feet high. I stood there in the backyard this morning of our neighbor's property, and I could barely see the roof line of 112 Tree Lawn. So again, from a visual point of view, I think the impact on 112 Tree Lawn is going to be minimal. So I have not talked to them. I know my client tried talking to them, and there was just negative feedback.
Okay, well, at least we've addressed some of those comments on record, and we appreciate your submission. Let's take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the applicant's presentation and the staff report, I am satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. The proposed development has altered fairly significantly since we first saw it, and has made significant efforts towards ameliorating and addressing the concerns. And I think that the agent has spoken to those that remain outstanding in terms of the 2 objection letters. So I'm satisfied with the variances. I'll put forward a motion of approval. That motion shall be subject to two conditions. Those being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated March 10th, 2022, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note just for the record that there were 2 letters of opposition and 2 letters of support submitted with respect to this matter.
Very well, thank you. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you, Mr. Reach. Have a good night.
Thank you, committee members. Have a good evening.
We have minutes to confirm from May 17th. Who'd like to confirm those? Mr. Flemington, thank you. And we have adjournment. Motion for adjournment, Ms. Murray. We are adjourned at 9:17.